I will bring you hope, old friend. And I ask only one thing in return. Don't get in my way. So no particular impetus for this video, just some thoughts I had rattling around when I did kind of a number of videos in rapid succession about the X-Men in film and sort of the potential for what may or may not, or what I would or wouldn't like to see happen in terms of how to integrate X-Men into the MCU, which I think we all kind of know is kind of inevitable at this point. A lot of the focus that I had was just very broad strokes, like how do we get mutants in? And I talked a little bit about Charles Xavier, but I've been thinking lately about Magneto. And I have a number of thoughts that I just kind of want to share about what I think his place can be, a couple of possibilities, and kind of my preference for what I think I'd like to see done for introducing Magneto into the MCU. A lot of this was spawned by, I can't remember where I saw it. I think it was in the comments section on one of those X-Men videos I did earlier, but I can't be certain of it now. Somebody brought up the fact that Magneto being a Holocaust survivor would put him, yeah, pretty much in his 90s, if not quite there, really close to it. And then it becomes a question of, do we start to strain credibility, or do we start to lose what, you know, really makes him such a great character, which is that, do you have him be improbably fit for someone that the age that a Holocaust survivor would be, even a young one, or do you allow him to be as physically challenged as someone of that age would be, and does he become less threatening as a result of that? So I thought about this, and I thought of a couple things that could be done. Now, I'm kind of having this conversation separate from the stuff I talked about before, my thoughts on how to integrate mutants, introduce them, explain why they haven't come up yet, etc., etc. So this is kind of a separate conversation from that. I'm really just zooming in on Magneto as a character. Now, first of all, I do want to say I absolutely agree that Magneto's origins involving his time in a concentration camp and surviving the Holocaust are essential to him as a character. It is a massive piece of what informs his philosophy, his life decisions, his dread and condemnation of humanity. He survived the worst of what humanity is capable of, and that does a lot to shape his outlook on life in general and humanity and whether or not they're worth anything. So it really is truly essential to his makeup. So I figured there's a couple different ways to go about this. I'm kind of building up to the one that was the idea that I had that I kind of liked the best. So first, there is the possibility that Magneto is in fact already dead. Could be from age, could be, you know, a case of he actually died some time ago. And I think there's I know this sounds blasphemous because, like, but we love Magneto, and I mean, he's really important. He's a really important figure, but I almost wonder if there's more mileage to be gained at this point out of having him serve more as a martyr and a philosophical figurehead than a character in his own right. And I don't say that because I don't like Magneto. I love Magneto, but however, the MCU chooses to tackle X-Men, it does need to be done differently from how the Fox movies did it. And in some cases, that'll mean skewing closer to the original comics in the cases where Fox, you know, went more in their own way. But in the case where Fox was really true to the comics, maybe that means just going in a different direction from the original source material. So with the idea that Magneto has already passed on, sort of my notion there is you could have it be a situation where maybe he already tried to lead some degree of mutant uprising, which was not only put down, but the people who put it down then covered it up because they, first of all, I think at this point, because the MCU hasn't introduced mutants, you need to cover up, you need to have people covering up the fact that they even exist. But in addition to that, if that ever became public, if his place and what happened to him and what he tried to do and his erasure from history as a result of that, it would have a similar connotation to, say, a slave rebellion that was wiped from history by the slave owners that put it down. And his name and his passion and his hopes for people like him could definitely be used as a banner, and therefore he, as I said, he becomes a martyr for a cause as opposed to a character in his own right. That's one possibility that could be done with him, and it would retain his original origins. I know it's not impossible to do some sort of time displacement or reality bending or some other way to explain why he could have been there at the Holocaust but is not actually physically 90. I kind of touched on that a little bit, but I don't like those possibilities, and I think it's just an excuse to give us, basically just give us a version of Ian McKellen again. And I love Ian McKellen in the part, but we already have it. We kind of need something new. So I don't like any of the cheats that could be used to just bring him forward in time, and not so that he doesn't have to be that age, whether it's freezing him like Cap, or we get reality or time manipulation as a result of Infinity War, or any of that. They're possible. They are certainly possible. There are mechanisms in the MCU that would allow for that to happen, but I don't love those as ideas. The other one that I hit on, and this is the one that I kind of was like, huh. Like, it hit me just as a general notion. I actually kind of tossed it out on Twitter just to see if I got immediate bite back on it, and I didn't. That's not an indicator of much. I have way fewer Twitter followers than I have subscribers here, so we'll see what happens when I suggest this. But going back to what I said originally, that being the survivor of genocide is absolutely vital to Magneto's origin and establishing his philosophies and his approach to life. I do believe that's true. Does it absolutely have to specifically be the Holocaust, though? Because the Holocaust was not the last time that genocide happened. I know it's like the big major frame of reference for a lot of people, well, Western audiences mainly. It is our primary frame of reference because it's the most, well, first of all, it's got the highest death toll for the ones we've actually been able to calculate, and it also is the one that happened last, chronologically in sort of our realm, in the Western world. When I say Western world, I mean kind of Europe and North America. That's usually what people mean when they say that. So that is our go-to point of reference, but there was actually quite a few incidents of genocides, really bad ones, in the 70s. So he could have been a survivor of any number of those places. Places like Cambodia, Bangladesh, East Timor, Burundi. These are places that went through horrific genocides of people, just certain types of people, certain tribes, certain races, certain whatever, just attempting to be wiped out. So this happened again, and it happened much more recently than the 30s and 40s, which would allow you to have a survivor of this kind of thing, but not link it specifically to the Holocaust. What Magneto needs to have been witness to is to see a group of people being systematically wiped out for no reason than certain facts of their birth, which is something they do not have control over. That is what matters, and that doesn't restrict it to the Holocaust. It does allow for other things. And, having him be around for things like that in the 70s, depending on how old you want him to be when it happened to him, that will put him in his 50s, 60s, around about the age Ian McKellen was when he started playing the character in the first place, when the Fox movies first started coming out. Or if you want to go more recent than that, you want to go even younger, there was what happened in Rwanda in the early 90s. And in that case, if you wanted to go that way, you could make him basically my age, and you could have him be a young upstart and somebody who just is really pushing for it now, as opposed to somebody who's more the sort of elder statesman of a certain philosophy. He could be the younger Firebrand version if you really wanted to do something different and have something maybe more in line with Michael Fassbender than the McKellen take. Now, there should be, if you were paying attention to the places I named, something kind of obvious that would be a change to the character if any of those were selected as the genocide that is part of Magneto's origin, which is that he wouldn't be white anymore. He would, you know, depending on where you wanted to root it, he would probably be black or Southeast Asian, or, you know, these other parts that he would very clearly not be white. I like to think not too many of my own subscribers would have a huge knee-jerk reaction of, don't change his race! But even if you do, I'm hoping you're going to stick around and hear me out on this, because this would not be a case of, you're changing his race just because. This would actually be changing it for not a case of diversity, like it would be changing it in order to actually preserve the character. Because like I said, this genocide has to be a part of his youth. It is essential to him as a character. And let's be honest, what makes more sense? A weird, convoluted, you know, time-displaced reality, whatever, or just make him the victim of a more recent thing? And again, I do understand that the MCU allows for that, but is the actual color of his skin so essential that it's worth going through that sort of narrative pretzel maze nonsense in order to retain it, when it's just an easier solution to have him be the survivor of something more recent? And in a way, I think especially if he is a presence in the Western world, whether it's in Europe or in North America, where these movies are usually set, you know, I mean, it's Marvel. Almost everything happens in New York. To have him be the victim of a genocide that doesn't get nearly the recognition that the Holocaust does, at least not in this country, that would be one more thing to fuel his anger. Not only was he part of a people who were almost wiped out simply because of a certain fact of their birth, but he would have additional fuel for that anger because he would have been part of a genocide that most Americans maybe heard about in history once and couldn't tell you much about if you asked them on the street. I mean, I couldn't. I had the notion, and then I had to look up, are there instances of genocide recent enough to go with this idea that I had? And yeah, there are. Like, frighteningly way more than I thought there would have been. So don't think that this is me going, I knew about that. I didn't know well enough either. And actually the Cambodia one was even suggested by one of the people who replied to my Twitter. But I mean, wouldn't that just make even more fuel, make him more angry, justify it more? It's like, I have seen what humanity is capable of doing and what they're capable of ignoring. Because as horrific as the Holocaust was, one thing that has not and yes, I know Holocaust deniers are a thing, but as a society, we have done a heck of a lot to preserve the memory of what happened. But when similar things have happened in other places, we kind of go, oh, boy, that stinks. Boy, glad I don't live there. And that, it would be one more thing that could fuel a fire. And let's be honest, I kind of would smile a lot if there were people who threw a fit because Magneto was changed to a different color and a different race, but the reason for that change was actually to preserve an aspect of his character rather than to alter it. Because as long as he's still a survivor of genocide, what have you actually changed? All you've changed is skin color. Like, you've made the single most superficial change, but have done so in order to preserve the true essence, important aspect of his life and his history. So yeah, that's kind of where I land. I think when they get to Magneto and introducing him to the MCU, I think he should be the survivor of a more recent genocide than the Holocaust. I think that would be an interesting take. It'd be a different take. It would retain the character at his core, and it would allow us to avoid any needless weirdness to try and justify him being around otherwise, and we would still get to keep him. Because, I mean, with my initial idea, which I don't hate, the idea that he's already passed on, like, we would see his impact, and, you know, we saw that a little bit with Spider-Man Homecoming, that we didn't actually ever get to meet Uncle Ben, but we still see the impact that he and his death had on Peter. The difference is, though, Uncle Ben was never a character beyond just the origins of Spider-Man. He was always just kind of a presence in memory, whereas Magneto, he could be that, but we would be losing something because he has been a present vibrant character, and it would be a shame to lose that. So, yeah, I think I'm done. So those are my thoughts on how I think the MCU should update Magneto. What are your thoughts on this? Whatever they are, keep them civil, even if you disagree with me, please. But put them down in the comments. Let's talk about them. Don't forget, like, subscribe, all that stuff. I got links to a bunch of stuff down below. Podcasts that I'm involved in, my Twitter. All that's in the description. And until next time, this council is adjourned.